In Beirut, armed extremists seize a plane to make a political statement. They terrorize the crew and passengers, including 2 U.S. citizens. As attacks increase against Americans abroad, the FBI and the CIA undertake a daring operation to arrest a hijacker and to send a powerful message to terrorists everywhere.
In the 1980s, the United States faced a deadly new enemy abroad, an expanding network of terrorists targeting American interests. Hundreds of innocent people were killed in bombings, executions, and hijackings. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the violence escalated, the U.S. government responded with new laws that gave the FBI broader powers to go after these radical extremists. This is the story of one of the FBI's first cases in the war on terrorism, a war that started long before September 11th.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Thank you.
14. Enjoy your flight.
June 11th, 1985.
You're in seat 12A. Hi there.
66 passengers, including an American university professor and his son, board Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402 from Beirut, Lebanon to Amman, Jordan. A gang of heavily armed terrorists overpowers the passengers and crew. They force flight attendants to identify undercover sky marshals to prevent them from intervening. The lead hijacker forces his way into the cockpit and orders the crew to take off. Once in the air, he demands that the captain fly to Tunis. The captain does not speak Arabic. His co-pilot translates. The hijacker wants to force a meeting with the Lebanese ambassador and the chairman of the Arab League, Chadley Khalibi. The goal, to make demands, including the removal of 20,000 Palestinians from Lebanon. As the plane flies toward Tunis, the terrorists beat and torture the sky marshals. They appear to have complete control until the aircraft finally enters Tunisian airspace. Former member of the FBI's International Terrorism Squad, Special Agent Tom Hansen.
They were denied landing authority, and in fact, the Tunisian authorities blocked the runways with fuel and water trucks. The main hijacker had conversations over the aircraft radio with the tower. This went back and forth for an extended period of time, and he was simply unable to break the Tunisian will to allow the aircraft to land.
Unable to force a meeting with Arab League Chairman Chadley Khalibi, the hijacker reads his statement to the control tower. The aircraft continues to circle the Tunis airport, becoming dangerously low on fuel. The pilot convinces the lead hijacker that to avoid crashing, they must fly to Palermo, Italy to refuel.
We're dangerous with low on fuel. We're going to land in Palermo.
Flight 402 approaches the Italian airport, but the captain cannot land. The runways there are also blocked. He informs the air traffic control that they must either allow the plane to land or clean up the wreckage.
Tell it was clear. Get the landing gear down.
The tower finally complies.
Let him know we're landing the plane. Okay.
Once they are on the ground, the hijackers demand that the plane be refueled. Airport authorities at Palermo refuse. The Italians stall for time with a simple deception.
They notified the flight deck that they had notified the Arab League and that they were making all attempts and felt confident that they could get Chadley Kalibi to travel from Tunis to Palermo to meet with the hijackers.
The hijacker is suspicious. Why would Chadley Kalibi travel to Palermo when he refused to meet him at Tunis airport? After an hour of waiting, the hijacker tells the tower that he will throw 2 children from the plane if airport authorities do not send out a refueling truck.
Okay.
10 minutes later, Flight 402 is refueled and heading back to Tunis. For the second time in one day, the plane circles above Tunis International Airport. The captain tells the tower that the hijacker wants to read his statement on Tunisian radio, a state-run network. The air traffic controller responds that they cannot patch him through. They don't have the equipment.
Listen, he doesn't even speak English, okay?
To appease the hijacker, the captain lies to him and tells him the tower has agreed to broadcast his statement. Flight 402 returns to Beirut International Airport. Another terrorist boards the plane. He orders a few children and elderly passengers to leave. He relays a message from a superior, instructing the lead hijacker to fly over Jordan and Syria to read their proclamation. The plane again takes off. But after spending more than 24 hours in the air, the lead hijacker decides to turn back.
He did not feel that they were getting a bang for their buck, so to speak. So the aircraft never went to Jordan and never went to Syria.
The aircraft circles Lebanon for several hours before finally landing in Beirut. Determined to get their message across, the hijackers rigged the nose of the aircraft with plastic explosives. At 9 a.m., the lead hijacker calls the tower. He vows that if 20,000 Palestinian refugees are not expelled from Lebanon by 2 o'clock that afternoon, he will kill the remaining hostages. In Beirut, gunmen rigged the cockpit of a hijacked plane with explosives. Aboard are 66 passengers, including 2 United States citizens and 9 crew members. The hijackers tell the tower that they will kill all the hostages if the government does not expel more than 20,000 Palestinians from Lebanon by 2 p.m. FBI Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Without any real notice, the passengers were ordered off the aircraft and instructed to enter into the terminal building.
Inexplicably, their 30-hour nightmare is over. The hijackers place hand grenades around the cabin. With the aircraft emptied and in the presence of international media, the hostage takers deliver one more emphatic statement. U.S. federal law enforcement agencies are determined to catch the hijackers. For the FBI, it is an historic moment. For the first time, they can legally pursue terrorists who have attacked Americans overseas, a power they had only recently acquired. In the early 1980s, Lebanon was a country ravaged by civil war. With the central government in shambles, Christian and Muslim militias clash, fighting for control. Beirut, once considered the Paris of the Middle East, is reduced to rubble. The situation further deteriorates, eventually forcing the U.S. Marines to deploy to Lebanon as part of a multinational peacekeeping force. The violence only escalates. In October of 1983, a suicide bomber detonates a truck full of explosives at the Marine barracks at Beirut International Airport. The blast kills 241 U.S. servicemen. 3 seconds later, a similar bomb destroys the French Army barracks, killing 58. The bombing at the Marine barracks is the single deadliest attack on Americans overseas. Former FBI Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigation Division, Oliver Buck Revell.
The horrendous attack upon the Marine barracks in '83, for a short time, really focused the attention of the American public on terrorism, but it always wandered off very quickly because there was not a belief of there being a sustained level of attack against the United States.
Many Americans are unaware that several radical Shiite Muslim groups have declared a low-intensity war on the U.S. Their goal, to drive Westerners out of Lebanon. The most notorious of these groups is Hezbollah, whom U.S. intelligence agencies suspect is behind the Marine barracks bombing. The following year, terrorism continues to plague the region. Diplomacy has failed. Peacekeeping forces have proven ineffective. And the FBI only has the legal authority to monitor international terrorism. Special Agent Tom Hansen.
We had no real jurisdiction to operate overseas or to prosecute those who committed acts outside the borders of the continental United States.
To give U.S. authorities broader international powers, Congress enacts the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. This new law allows the FBI to apply existing kidnapping and air piracy laws to crimes committed against American citizens overseas.
So from that point on, any terrorist group who took an American hostage anywhere in the world, including aircraft hijackings, became the subject of an FBI investigation. The hijacking of the Royal Jordanian flight violated the anti-hostage-taking statute that had been passed in 1984 for the very first time, and it involved the FBI then initiating an investigation, even though the plane had never been in the United States and it was not a U.S. carrier. There were Americans on board, they were held hostage, and therefore the statute was violated.
Tom Hansen becomes the lead agent on the case.
The actual investigation regarding the hijacking of Royal Jordanian 402 started off as a basic intelligence effort to gather as much information as possible.
The FBI knows the two most active terrorist groups in Beirut are Hezbollah and the Amal militia, another Shia faction formed during the Civil War.
Here's the plane.
They suspect it is the Amal militia who is responsible for the hijacking.
Here's everybody loading.
They control security at the Beirut airport, giving them access to the plane. Also, the hijackers' anti-Palestinian statements are typical of the group. Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell.
There was a dichotomy between the Hezbollah and the Amal, in that the Amal wanted to remove the Palestinians from the south of Lebanon to send them back into Israel or elsewhere, whereas Hezbollah was supportive of the Palestinian movement, particularly the PLO.
Both groups use extreme measures to get their message across. 3 days after the hijacking of Flight 402, 4 Hezbollah gunmen hijacked TWA Flight 847 in Athens and forced the pilot to fly to Beirut.
This was primarily an American flight. There were over 140 passengers on board, many of them American citizens.
The Hezbollah made a number of demands in conjunction with this aircraft hijacking, specifically for the release of certain Hezbollah Shia prisoners, as well as certain Palestinian prisoners. Demands which, of course, the United States had no control over, and of course it was against U.S. policy to make concessions to terrorist organizations.
The hijackers forced the TWA jet to fly back and forth between Beirut and Algiers. At each stop, they released women and children. In Beirut, the terrorists decide to prove they are serious about their demands. They kill U.S. Navy diver Robert Steedham.
They executed him in cold blood, threw him out on the tarmac there at Beirut International Airport, which of course enraged all of us and caused us to rededicate ourselves that this wouldn't stand. We would go after these people as long as it took.
39 hostages remain, all Americans. The hijackers move them off the plane and hold them at several locations around Beirut. President Ronald Reagan reacts.
Terrorists, be on notice. We will fight back against you in Lebanon and elsewhere. We will fight back against your cowardly attacks on American citizens and property.
Authorities consider possible diplomatic strategies.
There were continuous meetings in the sit room at the White House. We were trying to come up with some basis to effect the release of the hostages. This was probably the most stressful circumstance during my 12 years in charge of the terrorism program. We were using every intelligence means available to us. CIA assets, technical means, intelligence from allied services, through diplomatic channels. It was an all-out effort to obtain any and all information about who was holding the hostages, where they were being held, under what circumstances, and of course any information that would allow us to locate and potentially rescue the hostages.
As U.S. agencies gather intelligence, 39 American lives hang in the balance. June 1985. Hezbollah gunmen hijacked TWA Flight 847 in Athens and forced the pilot to fly to Lebanon. They hold 39 passengers hostage all over Beirut. The U.S. Department of State applies diplomatic pressure, trying to secure the release of the hostages. Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell.
We were putting pressure on the Syrians, pressure on the existing Lebanese government. We were using surrogates such as Egypt and Jordan. So it was really an all-out effort to use any and everyone that might have some ability to try and bring pressure on the Hezbollah to release the prisoners.
Finally, President Hafez al-Assad of Syria offers to negotiate with the captors and convinces them to release all 39 hostages. President Ronald Reagan gives voice to the nation's collective sense of relief.
The 39 Americans held hostage for 17 days by terrorists in Lebanon are free, safe, and at this moment on their way to Frankfurt, Germany. They'll be home again soon. This is a moment of joy for them, for their loved ones, and for our nation.
With the hostages safe, U.S. authorities turn their attention to finding the hijackers. FBI agents debrief the hostages of TWA Flight 847. Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Many of the passengers were shown photo spreads of previous suspects in hijackings, kidnappings, to determine whether or not any of these individuals were involved in the TWA incident. Many of the passengers identified the photo that we had of the main hijacker from the Royal Jordanian aircraft.
Hansen learns that the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402, a member of the Amal militia, guarded hostages from the TWA hijacking.
They gave accounts of conversations with this individual who admitted that he was one of the Royal Jordanian hijackers and asked them if they had seen the aircraft and basically bragged about his role in that incident.
He was the main
Investigators have identified a prosecutable subject. But gathering information on a Beirut-based terrorist is difficult at best. At the time, a boundary called the Green Line divides Beirut into the Christian East and the Muslim West. Dwayne Dewey Claridge is a former division chief in the Central Intelligence Agency's Directorate of Operations.
West Beirut was no man's land for Americans, or even for many Lebanese. And therefore, collecting information was extremely difficult, not only for CIA, but also for the friendly Lebanese intelligence services.
But the CIA is relentless. Embedded operatives in Beirut continue interviewing informants. Their persistence pays off. They learn where the Royal Jordanian air hijacking suspect lives. The only problem, U.S. authorities are powerless to go after him.
It just wasn't possible to coordinate with the Lebanese authorities to hand over the main subject. There was no specific government really in control.
Terrorism continues to spread throughout the world. In 1985 alone, there are 812 incidents of international terrorism. 926 people are killed, including 23 Americans.
We had so many acts of terrorism committed against U.S. citizens abroad that the president convened a task force, the Vice President's Task Force on Combating Terrorism, brought in cabinet-level people to examine the law, the policy, and the actions of the United States to best combat terrorism and to define the roles of the various agencies so that it was very clear. And they set up means for interagency coordination.
In January 1986, the task force creates the Operations Subgroup, or OSG.
I'd like to be meeting somewhere else under different circumstances, but terrorism.
This interagency panel is comprised of officials from the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and the State Department. Buck Revell represents the FBI.
The OSG had two responsibilities. One, to ensure that appropriate intelligence was disseminated on a full basis. Secondly, to coordinate operations against terrorist targets, whether they be groups or organizations or even terrorist-sponsoring nations.
Representing the CIA on the OSG is Dewey Claridge. Even before the creation of the OSG, Claridge had made recommendations for improving the CIA's counterterrorism operations.
We had to do something very different because terrorism is a transnational phenomenon. What I mean by that is that an operation may be planned by a group in Syria but carried out in Rome. Now, the U.S. government, like all governments, is organized on geographic lines, no matter what agency you're talking about. And it inhibits really getting after the terrorists. To handle that, you would create a center where the center would operate across national boundaries or across the divisional boundaries of CIA. The solution, at least for CIA, was to create the Counterterrorism Center to deal with a transnational problem, both in terms of geography and bureaucratic turf.
The CTC unites operatives from each of the agency's divisions, enabling them to pool intelligence. Dewey Claridge is named chief of the center.
It was a revolution. Never before had CIA ever organized across geographic boundaries or bureaucratic geographic boundaries on anything.
This afternoon,
The U.S. is now in a position to take action against the terrorist threat, and the OSG is at the center of the effort.
We were looking for a target which would do several things for us. One, we wanted to demonstrate to the terrorists in the Middle East that we had the will and the capability of going after them anywhere at any time. Second, we wanted to demonstrate the effectiveness of the new law and to have it tested in the courts. So we were looking for proactive opportunities to essentially put on notice that the United States was not going to be dormant. It was going to be proactive in addressing these problems.
Members of the OSG sift through intelligence on several wanted terrorists, including the hijackers of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402 and TWA Flight 847.
Coordinate our targets, all right? If you got something.
The problem is, none of the potential targets are accessible.
One of them too.
That's kind of a tough place to get into, but I assure you that
For now, all the CIA and the FBI can do is gather information on the wanted terrorists and work to get indictments.
This is the man.
Special Agent Tom Hansen.
As most investigations go, there has to be an element of luck, and ours came in June of 1987.
The OSG learns that the Drug Enforcement Agency already has a Lebanese informant working out of Cyprus. Because of his associations, they believe he could help them locate wanted terrorists. In debriefing him, a CA operative learns the informant knows the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402. U.S. authorities may finally have the means to capture him. In the 1980s, with the growing threat of violence against Americans abroad, the U.S. government makes international terrorism a top priority. In 1986, the Operations Subgroup, or OSG, learns that a DEA informant knows the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402. FBI Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Not only did he know the main hijacker, but they had shared a friendship and an association over a period of approximately 4 years. In fact, indicated that he felt that he could get this person to travel outside of Lebanon and visit him in another country. And this gave us one thing that we hadn't had in the past, and that was accessibility.
Former chief of the CIA's Counterterrorist Center and OSG member Dewey Claridge.
By getting our hands on him and bringing him back to the States and put him on trial, we would be signaling to the terrorists for the first time that we had changed our method of operation and we were on the offensive.
The informant is cooperating, but he has a few concerns. Former FBI Executive Assistant Buck Revell.
He wanted a significant reward and relocation of himself and his family to the United States under the Witness Protection Program. We felt in the interagency negotiations that this was a reasonable request. He certainly would be at risk if he and his family stayed in Lebanon, so we obtained authority to do that.
In Cyprus, the informant tells a CIA operative that the hijacker has left the Amal militia.
The hijacker, in fact, got into the drug business. He pursued this in Europe and other parts of the Mediterranean, so was somewhat actively involved in transportation and sale of narcotics.
He told us that the lead hijacker was interested in doing drug deals, that he had been involved in the past in certain drug operations, and he thought that he could be enticed to leave Lebanon, which was an important issue, and go to Cyprus or elsewhere where he would be vulnerable for arrest on our charges.
The OSG now believes the Royal Jordanian Air hijacker is within reach. With the informant's cooperation, the CIA plants listening devices in his home to record his conversations with the hijacker.
The determination was for him to go back and say, I know of a major international drug dealer who is looking to do an operation. You could bring the drugs in through Iran into Lebanon and then set up an operation to supply this drug dealer, and it would be very lucrative.
The plan calls for the informant to set up a meeting outside Lebanon between the hijacker and an imaginary drug dealer named Joseph. The OSG decides the meeting will take place on a yacht in international waters.
We did not want any operation that we undertook to involve violations of the sovereignty of another nation.
The OSG considers whether the U.S. military or the FBI should make the arrest.
Good news for you. She just handed me a memo.
Former commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team, Special Agent David Woody Johnson.
The basic plan was that any counterterrorism operation that occurred outside the United States or its territories would be handled by the military. Anything that occurred inside the United States or its territories, HRT would handle. And so now we got a situation where we may want to go over and grab a guy overseas. Do you use the military teams or do you use HRT? And that had to have been debated at the Attorney General, Department of Defense level. And they finally described it as an arrest. So we're going to use the hostage rescue team in spite of the fact that we're going to do it overseas.
They choose the HRT because the FBI has arrest powers and the military does not. Members of the HRT are law enforcement officers trained to do hostage rescue and testify in a U.S. court of law.
The idea was to try to take him alive and bring him back here and prosecute him. So I think the idea was to make a bigger political statement.
We wanted to make sure that the terrorist groups and organizations, particularly terrorist sponsoring nations, knew that the United States had both legal authority and the will to carry out whatever operations were necessary. And we knew that it had to be done with interagency cooperation. This operation took a very long time to plan. We didn't want to violate the sovereignty of another nation. We did not want to undertake this and not succeed. That would send exactly the wrong message.
The plan is ready to implement. The final hurdle is obtaining the president's approval.
As I was going to Washington National Airport to catch a commercial flight under just a regular passport to Athens, I received a telephone call in the Bureau vehicle from Ed Meese, the Attorney General. And he advised me, he said, "Buck, I just briefed President Reagan. It's a go. Good luck, and I'll talk to you on the other end."
Okay, I'll keep you posted.
Before launching the mission, the FBI solidifies their case.
We had to recontact the witnesses that we had previously interviewed and determine whether or not we could get a commitment from them that they would come to the United States and testify.
Several passengers and crew of Flight 402 agree to take the stand if necessary. The government now has a prosecutable case. The plan, dubbed Operation Goldenrod, is set into motion. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. Congress acts to give federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies broader powers to battle the growing threat of international terrorism. September 1987. Operation Goldenrod is a go. The FBI, the CIA, and the U.S. Navy deploy assets for the arrest of the Royal Jordanian Air hijacker. The FBI coordinates their portion of the operation from a command center aboard the USS Butte, positioned in international waters 15 miles off the coast of Cyprus. Special Agent Woody Johnson is the commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team.
The crew was told that they were just waiting for technical support to come out on the ship to help them correct some problems. We came off carrying gun cases and other things, and we have some pretty big agents, and they don't look like normal technicians, and those don't look like normal technical boxes. I remember having one of these young sailors say something the other went by, said, "Technicians, right."
In Greece, HRT member Special Agent Don Glasser rents the yacht where the arrest will take place.
Boat was chosen because it would blend in. It wouldn't attract any attention. We made some changes to it. We actually put a satellite navigation system in and making some adjustments to that and actually put a Loran on it. And it's a electronic navigation equipment.
In the port town of Limassol, Cyprus, Dewey Claridge and the CIA team set up a command post in a hotel room.
We had a communications officer with us and a lot of aluminum trunks of equipment, which were passed off as photographic gear. And we had satellite communications back to Washington, to EUCOM at Stuttgart, that's the U.S. military command at Stuttgart. And of course we had communications with the Butte, with the yacht, and headquarters was patching our communications through to the FBI headquarters, the White House, and whoever else. Everybody wanted to be in on this, know what was going on.
Under sail off the coast of Greece, the FBI arrest team alters the appearance of the yacht to protect the owner's identity.
We changed the flag from a Grecian flag to Italian flag. We've changed the home port and the name on the hull, and we turned the life preservers all around, which had the name of the boat on it.
Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell oversees the Bureau's command center on the USS Butte.
We had an emergency response team. We had a helicopter turning up on the deck, on the aft deck, ready to immediately respond with automatic weapons and other capabilities to defend against any attempt by pirates or terrorist groups to intercede in the operation. Our concerns over the actual execution were that we could get him to the location in international waters to execute the arrest, but also that we could secure that arrest and that we could keep it from becoming an international incident. In these type circumstances, you never know exactly what you're going to be faced with. We were dealing with a very fluid situation in Lebanon. We had to have the CIA operations in place in Cyprus. We had to have the FBI operations in place on board the yacht, which was the intercept vessel, and our command and control and emergency response on board the USS Butte, which was going to have to stay in international waters but be very close by. And since we couldn't control the exact timetable, it had to be very flexible.
The FBI and the CIA are ready. CIA operatives tell the informant to call the hijacker in Beirut and tell him everything is in place. He needs to come to Cyprus now to meet the fictitious drug dealer, Joseph.
The hijacker bought into this idea of coming to Cyprus to meet Joseph, who we basically manufactured as a big drug person. Hijacking aircraft doesn't really make you much money, if any. But and so he was looking to make some money.
The hijacker arrives at the informant's home, where he will stay until the operation begins.
We made sure that not only did he throw money around quite lavishly when he brought the hijacker over to Cyprus, but he had showed him a suitcase full of money that certainly impressed the hijacker. He got the hijacker to state on tape that he indeed was the chief hijacker of the Jordanian aircraft. This is something Justice Department wanted very much. The good news was that the target, the hijacker, was on Cyprus on schedule. But the bad news was that we had learned that the Cypriot police were looking for him because somehow he had gotten on a watch list of undesirables.
Our neighbor was running around Cyprus with a warrant on him.
Operatives cannot afford to have local police arrest the hijacker in the middle of the operation. The CIA decides to have the informant move himself and the hijacker into the same hotel where they have the command center set up.
I felt we could take that risk because it was a weekend. And it was unlikely that the police would energize themselves to run around, particularly to a high-class hotel and a new one at that, searching for this fella.
On Sunday morning, the informant tells the hijacker it's time to meet Joseph. He explains that since the drug dealer can't come to Cyprus, they need to meet him aboard his yacht. The informant's brother will take them to him in his boat.
We had to have, quote, American eyes, U.S. eyes on the target, on the hijacker, when he boarded the boat to be able to tell Washington with absolute certainty that it was the target who was boarding the boat. And so one of our officers was located on the pier.
Special Agent Tom Hansen.
The boat departed with the cooperating witness and the main subject on time and headed out towards the yacht.
Copy that. They're away.
We informed everybody on the communications net of that fact and that the operation was underway. We asked for Washington to begin to implement the extraction of his relatives, near relatives, sisters, brothers, and children from various places around the Middle East, which had been part of the deal.
Yeah. All right.
We had a picket boat system in place to act as guideposts for the cooperating witness to navigate from.
FBI's hostage rescue team commander, Special Agent Woody Johnson.
My job is to worry about the people that are working for me, and it's a concern if this is a double cross. Have they set us up? Is he, going along with this thing, but they're sitting in a boat somewhere waiting on us, and then they're going to come charging in on us on the yacht, and we're going to end up in a fight on the water.
For now, all the FBI can do is wait. Undercover FBI agents await the arrival of the Royal Jordanian Air hijacker in international waters 12 miles off the coast of Cyprus. FBI's hostage rescue team commander, Special Agent Woody Johnson.
We pre-positioned the HRT guys on the deck, openly there with the appearance that we're bodyguards for the drug dealer.
Get that fender ready to go over.
Also on deck are two female FBI agents to act as diversions and help put the hijacker at ease.
The rest of us were secreted down below deck with a sniper in the pilot house in the event somebody shows up that we didn't expect. Or if these guys suddenly jump up and have got weapons and start shooting, we can defend ourselves.
Special Agent Don Glasser.
Everything looked normal on our boat. The female agents were waving to him, beckoning him to come aboard the boat.
I keep thinking this seems to be too easy. Is this guy, have they set us up?
The undercover agent spoke to them in Arabic, told them that the boss was down below in the boat taking a shower and be up shortly. We said, well, the owner's going to want him to be searched for weapons. It would only take a second. We apologized for that, but that was business. And he didn't resist that. So the other agent patted him down, give them a quick pat down for weapons. Didn't find anything on them.
Clean.
Go downstairs.
The other agent escorted him back to the cockpit area where he nodded to me, which was the signal that we'd execute the arrest. HRT operators came up from the cabin. He was very surprised. I'm not sure who he thought we were. He was absolutely terrified. Did not resist us. We put leg irons on him and we called the ship.
Agents send word of the successful arrest.
All right. We're out of here.
At that point, we knew that we'd done what we were supposed to do, deliver the target to the Bureau, and so we closed down the command post very rapidly, checked out of the hotel.
As soon as the arrest was made, we launched a boat from the Butte.
Butte is 900-foot ship, so we're talking big. Comes up over the horizon, and we came up alongside of it. And the captain was playing patriotic music over the loudspeaker. You could hear it. And he was flying a huge American flag off the back of it. At that point, he's telling the crew what's going on. He said, we're striking back, and you had the opportunity to be a part of it. I'll tell you one of the things that was really a thrill and actually kind of choked me up is when we came up on the deck. There probably 200-300 of the crew were up on the deck, and they were cheering and clapping. And it just really was kind of an emotional experience.
The Butte immediately headed west in the Mediterranean to link up with the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga.
Agents interview the hijacker aboard the Butte.
The debriefing of the terrorist was very helpful to the U.S. Intelligence community and getting an overall appreciation and understanding of the dynamics of circumstances in South Lebanon, the relationship between the Amal and the Hezbollah and the Lebanese government, and also the involvement of both Syria and Iran in that area.
We transported him to the Saratoga aboard military helicopter.
From there, FBI agents transfer the hijacker to an S-3 Viking for the long trip to the United States.
During its trip back to Washington, D.C., it had to perform 2 in-air refuelings. Once the flight was completed, it represented the longest continuous flight from the deck of a U.S. carrier that the military had ever performed.
After a 13-hour flight, the S-3 lands at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. The Flight 402 hijacker is immediately taken to Washington, D.C. for arraignment. In 1989, the hijacker is tried, convicted, and sentenced to 30 years in prison for conspiracy, air piracy, and hostage-taking.
The arrest and prosecution was the first instance of U.S. law bringing an individual into custody overseas, bringing him to the United States, and prosecuting him in federal court for a crime in which neither he nor the victim nor the act or circumstance ever touched U.S. territory. It was our hope that by carrying out such an audacious act that we would send a very strong signal to the terrorists that the game had changed, that we would no longer be essentially passive, but we'd be proactive in pursuing them across the entire world if necessary.
Operation Goldenrod was the first success of its kind in the U.S. government's new war on terrorism. On the streets of Washington, D.C., a bomb blast kills a former ambassador and his young assistant. As the FBI investigation closes in on the bombers, the killers set their sights on the agents and their families. The FBI is caught up in a dangerous hunt for a cold-blooded murderer as they target one of the most highly skilled opponents they have ever faced, a bomber who orchestrates the death of a diplomat.
1970s, South America faced a surge of political kidnappings and assassinations. When the killings spilled onto U.S. soil, it was time for the FBI to step in. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents struggled to pierce the closely guarded world of diplomats and assassins, trained spies and hired thugs, determined to stop a covert terror war waged by a rogue nation.
Washington, D.C., September 18th, 1976. A man prepares deadly revenge against one of his nation's fiercest critics.
Dear friends of Chile,
the intended victim is former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier. The outspoken socialist is in the U.S. condemning the military government of dictator Augusto Pinochet. The Pinochet government seized power 3 years earlier in a bloody coup. Letelier rails against the current Chilean regime for human rights violations and for stripping him of his Chilean citizenship. His outspoken criticism causes one European country to stop lending money to Chile. Just after midnight on September 19th, the bomber prepares to silence the diplomat once and for all. The radio-controlled bomb is secured under the driver's seat of Letelier's car. Now, all it needs is the right radio signal. 2 days later, Letelier drives to work.
I just have such a hard time.
His assistant, 25-year-old Ronnie Moffat, rides in the passenger seat. Her husband, Mike, rides in back. The car soon arrives on Embassy Row.
It was an economic one, but...
Police protecting the embassies call for ambulances and rush to help. Orlando Letelier is barely alive. The bomb blew off his legs and blasted shrapnel through his torso. Ronnie Moffat, hit by flying shrapnel, fights for every breath. Mike Moffat, incredibly, escapes unhurt, although frantically worried about his wife. An ambulance rushes Letelier away just as the FBI arrives. Special Agent Carter Cornick.
When we got there, like all crime scenes, it was an absolute mess. I saw the car, and there was a woman on the side of the road being administered to. The next thing I actually heard through the din of all the noise was a young man screaming, "Dina did it." And I had no idea who or what Dina was.
Under the law, the FBI investigates all attacks against foreign officials. Agent Cornick takes charge of the case.
Well, the first thing that was to do was to get control of the crime scene. A crime scene is a unique thing. It's only there once. And what you do at that crime scene very often determines, ultimately, the outcome of the case.
Agent Cornick requests more agents, including FBI bomb experts, to collect and label every possible piece of evidence.
We had an enormous amount of help. We had more than 150 agents doing the crime scene. We actually had forensic experts doing the crime scene. And that part of the crime scene was actually run by the chief of the explosive unit at my request.
During the search, the FBI hears the tragic news from the hospital that Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Moffat have died. The case is now a murder investigation. At the U.S. District Courthouse, the U.S. Attorney decides this politically sensitive public assassination must be handled with the utmost care and urgency.
In this case, a U.S. attorney was assigned to the investigation from day one. That had never been done before except in Watergate.
The U.S. Attorney assigns his most relentless prosecutor, U.S. Assistant Attorney Gene Proper.
It was a heinous murder, and I wanted to solve it to make sure that people knew you couldn't do it here. I don't care if Letelier was a socialist, a communist, or somebody on the far right. He was killed in a brutal way on the streets of the District of Columbia with a young woman, neither of whom deserved to die.
Tell me what you found out about
By the second day, investigators begin looking at possible motives for killing Letelier.
The primary motive from the beginning appeared to be a political assassination ordered by a foreign government. We had found out from the State Department that the military dictatorship of Chile was concerned that he had been personally responsible for stopping loans coming to the country.
Buenos Aires, Argentina. FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer does not want to tip off the Chilean government, so he talks with his contacts in Buenos Aires. He wants to find out if they have any information on whether Chilean intelligence may be involved. His Argentine source tells him about a secret program called Operation Condor. Intelligence agencies from right-wing South American countries have agreed to help each other watch left-wing activists and, if necessary, eliminate them. The official believes that Letelier's death may have been Condor's first kill. To get more information, the FBI turns to a U.S. State Department expert on Chile.
We need to know, and we need to know very frankly.
The expert tells them that Chile desperately needs American economic support.
International, but
The same morning of the assassination, the economics minister of Chile was getting off a plane at Dulles Airport to ask the U.S. government for economic aid to Chile.
The expert highly doubts that Chile would endanger its loans by killing Letelier.
So it was difficult for me to believe that a government would, on the one hand, order the assassination of this man, while on the other hand, trying to ask the U.S. government for aid.
2 weeks after the Letelier assassination, a commercial flight from Barbados to Cuba explodes. All 73 people aboard die. After the explosion, right-wing anti-Castro Cubans proudly claim credit. Because of the timing of the bombing of the airliner, investigators wonder if anti-Castro Cubans may have also had a hand in the assassination. Letelier was a socialist and an admirer of Fidel Castro. Seems like a long shot, but right now it's the only lead the agency has. Agent Cornick asks the FBI lab to compare the Letelier bomb against past anti-Castro Cuban bombs. Technicians have little to work with because the explosion destroyed most of the evidence. From what little remains, they determined that the bomb is unlike anything they've ever seen before. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack.
The lab came back and said basically the Letelier bomb doesn't match other right-wing Cuban bombs that we have examined already. We didn't want to hear that. That's the last thing you want to hear, that you don't have a match.
But because of the right-wing Cubans' history of assassinations, investigators can't entirely rule them out.
We were trying to keep an open mind that perhaps we have a new bomb maker on the set that we're not aware of.
Having hit a dead end, investigators set up a tip line to solicit information from around the world.
Thousands of leads, literally thousands of leads, came in by telephone. A special 1-800 number was established to handle the leads. We had leads coming in from Europe, leads particularly from Latin America.
One lead comes from a New York area reverend who says 3 Chilean intelligence agents flew out of New York shortly after the assassination. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack interviews the reverend.
And it was evident, you know, in the first 5 minutes of the interview that this guy had seen nothing. So, of course, I'm trying to zero in on, look, you know, who exactly saw these 3 Chilean agents?
The Reverend got the tip from some friends, but he will not reveal their names.
I told the Reverend, I said, look, get back to the people that supposedly saw this and get them in touch with us.
While he's waiting, Agent Wack heads to New York's JFK airport. He follows up on the Reverend's tip that Chilean agents flew out shortly after the assassination.
These items should be noted by the...
No one can confirm the story. The case stalls again.
There's nothing.
A few weeks later, Agent Wack says goodbye to his fiancée, who leaves for her job as an airline flight attendant. He has no idea he is not the only one who watches her go. In the airport parking lot, a threatening stranger confronts Wack's fiancée. The bombers are striking back, hitting the FBI close to home. A car bomb in Washington, D.C. kills former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant. As the FBI begins investigating the murder, Special Agent Larry Wack's fiancée is threatened. The frightened flight attendant calls Agent Wack.
I was absolutely appalled that something like this would happen, that whoever it was didn't have the guts to come after me, that they had to go after her.
Agent Wack believes he must have interviewed someone close to the assassination.
I don't know what we did, but we struck a nerve somewhere. And now we got to go back and re-examine what we've been doing, and myself, particularly what I had been doing, who I had been talking to, and so on, to see where this threat may have emanated from.
Agent Wack's fiancée helps create a sketch of the man who threatened her. Agents show the sketch to Chilean immigrants throughout New York, trying to find someone who recognizes the man. But no one seems to know him. Washington, D.C., 1 month after the bombing.
Clearly said in Townsend versus New York.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Propper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick receive a possible lead.
We got 2 Chilean.
The State Department provides photos of 2 suspicious Chilean intelligence officers whose real names are unknown. A month before the Letelier killing, at the U.S. Embassy in Paraguay, 2 Chileans requested visas for what were obviously false passports. One of the men did not look Chilean, and the 2 openly admitted being intelligence agents. They claimed they needed the visas to attend a meeting with the CIA in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'll need to see your passport.
The ambassador decided to take the unusual precaution of secretly photographing the passports.
Thank you.
When the CIA denied knowing the 2 agents, the ambassador canceled the visas. Investigators believed the photos could relate to their case. FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
We had these 2 photographs, but we didn't know who they were. If we could identify those 2 people, we could take the case a step further.
The mug shots, we got to roll through the books. We got to roll these guys.
A few days later, investigators get a lead that again points them to Cuba. A Venezuelan newspaper prints a story claiming right-wing Cubans based in the United States killed Letelier. It names the prime suspects as the Ayala brothers from New Jersey. Investigators know Enrique and Sanchez Ayala well. They are founding members of a violent anti-Castro group called the Cuban Nationalist Movement. They are suspects in several recent high-profile bombings, including a Russian ship in New York 5 days before the Letelier assassination, and an attempted bombing at the New York Academy of Music, where Cuban artists were set to perform. The FBI begins to wonder if the Ayala brothers also targeted Chilean socialist Orlando Letelier. In one of New Jersey's Cuban neighborhoods, an FBI agent tracks down Enrique Ayala to find out.
Brian, I'm with the FBI.
When the agent asks him where he was the day Letelier was killed, Ayala gives an odd reply.
That's my trump card. It's an ace up my sleeve.
Investigators in Washington, D.C. find his comments suspicious.
Well, I think there's
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper.
Right away, when you hear something like that, you begin to think, what's this guy want to hide?
Proper asks the FBI to serve Ayala with a subpoena to appear before the grand jury.
I told you.
In the United States, no citizen is obligated to talk to the police or the FBI. If the FBI comes up to you on the street, you can say, "Get lost." There is an obligation to testify before the grand jury if you're brought in by subpoena.
An agent heads out to serve Enrique Ayala with the subpoena.
FBI.
Ayala's wife says she doesn't know where he's gone. He's disappeared.
Ma'am? Hi,
Agents question anti-Castro Cubans, demanding that they give up Ayala. The pressure finally gets to Ayala, who agrees to come in.
Coming in, please have a seat.
At Proper's office in Washington, D.C., Ayala proclaims he had nothing to do with Letelier's death. Investigators ask why he made the comment about an ace up his sleeve.
You might have some information.
Ayala says he was just joking, pulling the agent's chain.
No, can't help me.
Proper grills Ayala before the grand jury. He denies any knowledge of the Letelier murder and takes the fifth when asked if he has recently traveled to Chile. New York City. A few days after Ayala's testimony, Special Agent Wack gets a call at home from a suspected anti-Castro bomber.
Do what?
He said that, I'm coming over to your house in a minute to talk to you.
Agent Wack fears he is in danger.
The big question was, how did he get my phone number? And more importantly, how did he know where I lived? So I grabbed my neighbor, who was a New York City police officer, told him, grab your gun, come outside, and I told him what had happened, that I had gotten this phone call, and I don't know what's coming next. We hid outside in an alleyway, and within a period of about 3 minutes, here comes this nationalist guy at my front door.
Yeah, it's him. He recognizes me.
We had an altercation out in front of my residence where he was telling us, that they didn't have anything to do with the threat on my fiance, and, why don't you back off of our group? I pretty much told him that the next time you show up at my front door, you're going to go home in a body bag. I was extremely mad at this whole situation. I mean, it was bad enough that my fiance gets threatened, and now I got these bombers showing up at my front door, and you're like, what's next?
Far from backing off, Agent Wack cranks up the pressure. If the Cubans are nervous, the FBI must be close to finding their connection to the assassination, and possibly even the bomber. Agent Wack goes after the Cubans, hunting for anyone with information.
If you think you're going to intimidate the FBI into not investigating, you're making a mistake. You're going to make them investigate harder.
I don't know nothing about it.
The people he approaches give him the cold shoulder or even insult him.
Hey, get away from me.
But he continues to hunt for leads. Finally, 5 weeks after Letelier's murder, Agent Wack meets a former Cuban bomb maker who says he wants to talk. It could be a major break in the case. Or it could be a setup for a hit on an FBI agent who's getting too close to the truth. A powerful remote-controlled bomb kills former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant in Washington, D.C. The FBI believes the key to the case may be hiding in the New York anti-communist Cuban community, an organization known for targeting outspoken socialists. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack doggedly hunts for leads until a former anti-Castro bomb maker tells him he wants to talk.
And the thing that he couldn't sleep with was he didn't care that Letelier died. He couldn't sleep with the fact that the girl was killed, Ronnie Moffett. And that's where he drew the line.
The bomb maker says he's heard that Enrique Ayala, the leader of a violent anti-Castro group, has met several times with a Chilean covert contact. He said the Cubans wanted support from the right-wing Chilean government. Agent Wack uses the information to question other informants. They tell him that Ayala has been seen meeting with a tall, blonde Chilean with a military bearing.
One informant was telling me that the nationalists were referring to him as El Flaco, or the tall, thin one.
Agent Wack has now confirmed the link between a Chilean agent and the Cuban nationalist movement.
Now you've got evidence of a Chilean agent in contact with the nationalists, and you've got the nationalists with a track record of bombings going back quite a few years. So, you know, it's starting to look like a duck and walk like a duck.
The FBI focuses their investigation on Chile. In Santiago, FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer follows up on Agent Wack's discovery of Enrique Ayala's link with Chilean officials. Chile's Interpol representative tells him that Ayala visited Chile 2 years earlier and may have met with the Chilean government or even the Chilean intelligence service. With this new information, Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper subpoenas Enrique Ayala and 2 of his friends to appear once more before the grand jury. A few days later, Proper gets a death threat on his private line.
What's wrong?
Proper believes they must be doing something that's making a guilty party nervous.
That means we're doing it right.
But instead of backing off, Proper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick step up their investigation.
We decided we're taking the 5th.
They bring in Enrique Ayala, who says he and his 2 friends will take the 5th in front of the grand jury and refuse to answer any questions. Investigators must continue to search for some way to crack open the case and get someone to talk.
Gentlemen?
FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
This thing is dragged on now, nothing happened, but it's not coming to a head. How the hell do we get on track?
A month later in New York, the Secret Service calls in FBI Special Agent Larry Wack. They've arrested a counterfeiter who specializes in making fake IDs who wants to cut a deal. He claims to know of a plot by the Ayala brothers to kill the U.S. Attorney General and Prosecutor Eugene Proper. After months of investigation, this could be the break in the case the FBI has been waiting for. The break that will finally lead them to the bombers. In Washington, D.C., a remote-controlled bomb kills a former left-wing Chilean ambassador and his assistant. In New York, 8 months after the assassination, a counterfeiter contacts the FBI. He provides fake IDs to an anti-communist Cuban group suspected of the bombing. The counterfeiter claims to have inside information and wants to cut a deal with FBI Special Agent Larry Wack.
He laid out a situation that he was in the process of making up false driver's licenses and passports and whatnot for some of the guys in the nationalist movement. You know, your first assumption is this crowd's getting ready to take off. They're going underground.
The counterfeiter says the Cuban nationalists told him that if their leader, Enrique Ayala, goes to jail, they will kill the U.S. Attorney General and Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper, the prosecutor on the case.
Well, if what you're saying is
Agent
true.
Wack offers to speak to the Secret Service on the counterfeiter's behalf if he will inform on Enrique Ayala and his brother Sanchez.
Okay. And you're willing to follow through on this?
The counterfeiter reluctantly agrees. He says he's supposed to meet with Sanchez Ayala soon to deliver a false ID. The night of the meeting, Agent Wack watches from hiding. The counterfeiter arrives carrying a false ID hidden in a magazine.
We were able to corroborate a lot of what he was telling us without him knowing it.
When they see Ayala exit the restaurant with the same magazine, the FBI knows that their new informant told the truth about working with the Ayalas. Maybe the Ayalas can lead them to their Chilean contact. Proper again calls Enrique Ayala into court, but he fails to appear. FBI agents can't find him anywhere. He's become a fugitive. This only adds to investigators' belief that he played a role in Letelier's assassination. 2.5 weeks later, the investigators' inside man delivers more fake IDs to Sanchez Ayala. At the end of the meeting, Sanchez rips $1 in two and gives the counterfeiter half. Sanchez says that a tall, blonde Chilean may contact the counterfeiter with the other half of the bill.
You know, this was turning into a James Bond spy novel here with the $50 bills and everything, the way this thing was going. But there was that tall, blonde Chilean again that we already heard about surfacing. He was this continuous, elusive guy.
The FBI doubts this mysterious Chilean intelligence agent will come all the way to America again to meet with their counterfeiter. Chilean intelligence can fabricate their own high-quality fake IDs. Agents follow Sanchez Ayala to Miami, hoping he will lead them to his fugitive brother. But after days of trailing Sanchez, they lose him. 2 weeks later, the FBI gets an unlikely break when a tall, blonde Chilean approaches the counterfeiter. At first, the Chilean casually chats with him about motorcycles. But before he leaves, he says that a friend of Enrique Ayala's will be in touch for more false IDs. When he hears about the tall, blonde Chilean, Agent Wack arranges an urgent meeting with the counterfeiter. Agent Wack shows the counterfeiter a photo layout, including a passport photo of a Chilean intelligence agent who tried to get into the U.S. using the false name Juan Williams.
Showed him the pictures, and he goes right to the Williams photo, and he says, "This is the guy that I met, absolutely no question about it."
Investigators finally have a name to link to the mysterious stranger. They go to Chile to try and learn all they can about the man who calls himself Juan Williams. In Santiago, FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer discovers that no one named Juan Williams works for the government or the armed forces. Washington, D.C. It has been 1 year since the assassination of former left-wing Chilean Ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant Ronnie Moffett. Investigators believe the right-wing anti-Castro Cubans working with people inside Chile's intelligence agency possibly orchestrated the murder. Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper tries to make sense of the lead so far.
The case started to slow down in mid to late 1977 because where we had this information, we didn't really have a whole lot of proof. And we were trying to get information from Chile without a lot of success.
Investigators decide to approach the Chilean government directly and demand information on the intelligence agent who is meeting with Cuban bomb makers in the U.S. and uses the false name Juan Williams.
Chile's got what appears to be a bona fide intelligence agent running around with a bunch of bombers in the United States, and this is going to be very embarrassing for Chile. They better have a good answer for this one.
In Santiago, Chile,
what is it that I can do for you today?
Agent Shearer tells a Chilean official that the FBI wants to interview Juan Williams and another intelligence agent who also applied for a U.S. visa using a false name.
You're quite sure? We have some photos of them.
The U.S. could prosecute both men for filing for a visa with a fake passport.
The men and
The Chileans say they will look into it.
we have a very large organization.
After waiting a month with no reply from Chile, Proper files court papers with an unsealed cover letter that includes the agents' false names and implies they played a major role in Letelier's murder. If the Chilean government masterminded the killing, Proper intends to hold them accountable.
I summarized what I thought the evidence would show and put it in a letter that was outside the package. Nobody had ever seen that done before, and the State Department sort of laughed about it. But I thought when that became public, and I made sure it became public because it was not a sealed document, the Chileans would panic and we'd start to hear things. Then what happened is the photographs which were in there sealed leaked to the press.
News stories hit front pages all over the world, accusing the Chilean intelligence service called DINA of the killing.
And the Chileans went crazy because all of a sudden it was saying DINA was involved with the Cubans in killing Letelier. Didn't say 100%. And the Chileans started calling us. They wanted a meeting with the Secretary of State. They wanted a meeting with the Attorney General.
The newspaper articles unleash a flood of tips for the FBI. One newspaper identifies the mysterious blonde intelligence agent known as Juan Williams.
You can see on the screen there.
In a shocking twist, it reveals that he was born in the U.S. The FBI is stunned. Could it be possible that the Chilean assassin is an American? While the FBI investigates the 1976 car bomb killing of Orlando Letelier and his aide Ronnie Moffett, newspapers all over the world pick up the story of two Chilean intelligence officers suspected of the killings. When the story breaks, the FBI gets word that a newspaper has identified the intelligence agent known as Juan Williams.
Juan Williams.
What do you know? Chilean newspaper just
It appears he's an American.
Michael Townley.
All right, run that name through U.S. passport, get on the horn right away.
FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
When it turned out one of them was a U.S. national, that made our position so much stronger. And why was a U.S. national working for the Chilean intelligence service?
The U.S. Passport Office reports that there is a Michael Townley who matches the description of the blonde intelligence agent currently registered as an American living in Chile. He's 36, born in Iowa, but grew up in Chile. Agents head to Fort Lauderdale to follow up another tip, that Juan Williams is really a man named Kenneth Einart. He's been buying electronic surveillance equipment for the Chilean government. At an electronics store that sells hidden microphones, phone taps, and other high-tech surveillance equipment, the store owner identifies the Juan Williams passport photo as Kenneth Einart. The owner provides records showing that Einart shopped at the store the day the bomb killed Letelier. He also provides an official letter from the Chilean government authorizing Kenneth Einart and Michael Townley to make purchases on their behalf. The FBI now believes that Kenneth Einart is an alias for Michael Townley and that the Chilean government is somehow involved in the killing. Now, the FBI has their first solid suspect in the case. The next day in New York, FBI Special Agent Larry Wack meets with a counterfeiter turned informant. He's been watching a group of anti-communist Cuban nationalists the FBI suspects of working with the government of Chile. Agent Wack wants to know how they are responding to the news that the FBI has identified their Chilean contact, Michael Townley.
Everybody in the exile community with the nationalists and everywhere else went scrambling. It was like, uh-oh, cat's out of the bag. They know who he is. And it was time to run.
Agent Wack pressures the counterfeiter to set up a meeting with a key Cuban nationalist suspect before he runs.
I told the counterfeiter, I said, just tell them flat out that I came to see you. I found out that you're hanging with the nationalists again, and that I paid you a visit, and you're getting subpoenaed to the grand jury.
The plan works, and the counterfeiter meets with the suspect to ask his advice.
They ask you to testify.
The suspect tells him to take the fifth and say nothing.
To plead the fifth.
The counterfeiter keeps asking why.
Because
We did it, meaning Letelier. We did it. We know it. They know it. Let them prove it. Which is exactly what we wanted.
The FBI now has an informant's claim that a nationalist confessed. But they still need some physical evidence linking the Cubans with Michael Townley.
We couldn't connect him to the murder. We had no evidence he was involved in the murder, but we certainly believed it because he was the blonde Chilean who was dealing with the Cuban nationalist movement that internally had said they're involved in the Letelier murder, and they were now fleeing. They were running from us.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick tried to fit together the evidence.
You know, it's one thing to have a source who you may or may not trust 100% tell you one thing. It's another thing to have, actual proof.
Investigators desperately need someone to cooperate and confess to what happened. They hope it will be Michael Townley, but the agents have to find him first.
The next step was to go to Chile and to try to, in some way, force the government of Chile to cooperate with us in the investigation. The fact that these two men had applied for false passports to come to the United States a week before the assassination was of real interest to us.
Over the next 2 weeks, Proper and the U.S. government put tremendous pressure on Chile. Proper prepares official letters through the World Court requesting the chance to talk with Townley.
I took him to the chief judge in Washington, and he signed the documents. He asked me how the case was going. I'll never forget this. He said, "How's the case going?" I said, "It's a very tough case, Judge. It's just very tough." He said, "I know that." He said, "But God makes people who do things like this make mistakes. All you've got to do is find the mistakes."
To find the mistakes, Proper has to get to Townley. But the prosecutor is still getting resistance from the Chilean government.
I'm sorry.
Then the Chilean government said, this is going to make the government fall. We can't give over an intelligence officer. We said, he's an American. He committed a crime in the United States. We want him.
We were not allowed access to people that we wanted to have access to, members of the Chilean intelligence service. But at the same time, other Chilean officials were cooperating with us quietly.
Behind the scenes, the Pinochet government quietly cuts a deal with the U.S. They will hand over Townley if the U.S. promises not to use his testimony against Chile. The U.S. agrees. The next day, Chilean police take Michael Townley for a drive. He hopes that the intelligence service will protect him, perhaps even reward him with a long vacation in a remote area.
Just take me far, get out of here.
He has no idea what is really waiting for him.
On vacation, huh?
Chilean intelligence agent and bombing suspect Michael Townley thinks he's about to embark on a vacation. But FBI agents are waiting at the airport for authorities to turn him over. FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
There was an Air Ecuadoriano flight going from Chile to New York. And the plane was held by the Chilean government on the runway until we got there. Townley was turned over to us. He was disoriented. He was afraid. He could not believe that the Chilean government had betrayed him.
On the flight, Townley refuses to talk without a lawyer. Once in the U.S., the FBI holds Townley at the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia. They suspect him of murdering a Chilean diplomat and enlisting right-wing Cubans to help him. But the only real charge they have against him is using a fake passport. Townley meets with his attorney, while Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper prepares for plea negotiations.
And it's going to be very difficult because we really don't have a murder case against Townley. We still did not have any case against Michael Townley except the passport violation case.
Miami, Florida.
Hey man, hold up. That's Ayala.
Agents get a break when an alert Miami police officer spots one of the men linked to Townley in the murder, Cuban nationalist leader Enrique Ayala.
You're Enrique Ayala, aren't you? No, sir. Please take off your sunglasses. These are my identification, sir. Seguro que sí.
Agent Cornick and Prosecutor Proper use Ayala's arrest and the arrests of other nationalist suspects to pressure Townley.
Enrique Ayala has been arrested.
We went to Townley and his lawyer and said, your time's about out. We've just rolled the Cubans up. We're going to make the deal with the first person who's willing to talk to us. We knew the Cubans would never talk, but we didn't tell that to Townley and his lawyers. Townley has to think we know what happened. We singled him out and brought him to the United States. He has to worry that we have more information than he knows about. But all we had on Michael Townley was a passport violation and knowledge that he had met with the Cubans. But unless the Cubans talked or Townley talked, we didn't have enough to bring a case against anybody.
Don't worry, Michael.
After hours of negotiation, Townley agrees to cooperate in exchange for a 10-year sentence. Townley reveals that he worked as a highly skilled agent and assassin for Chilean intelligence.
He worked for the Chilean secret police, which was run by a general, and he viewed his assassinations as legitimate orders from his government. The Chilean secret police wanted Letelier dead because Letelier was viewed as a spokesman who was in the United States and creating a fuss against the Pinochet government. He was meeting on Congress with senators, he was talking around the world, and the Pinochet government was a very repressive, right-wing government, and Letelier was very well-spoken, and he was causing them some grief.
This was not Townley's first assassination.
Given an order, military operation, and that's what...
As an expert in electronics and bomb making, Townley helped commit assassinations in South America, North America, and Europe.
This man, without question, was the most dangerous man I have ever met. This is a man who bragged about his role in building bombs that killed other people. And the justification? Letelier was a soldier, I was a soldier.
Townley says he made a bomb in a motel room and attached it to Letelier's car at night. The Cubans were anxious to create ties to the right-wing Chilean government and agreed to help. Townley arranged for the Cubans to set the bomb off. He then flew to Florida, leaving two of the Cubans with a remote control. He says he doesn't know who pushed the button.
The Cubans had no interest in Mr. Letelier. They wanted a relationship with the Chilean secret police for several reasons. Chile could give them sanctuary when they were in trouble in the United States. They had a very similar political ideology, was very right-wing. And they could get, they thought, material support, maybe money from Dina.
To prove Townley's story to a jury, the FBI buys an identical car and has him build an exact copy of the bomb.
All of this was filmed by the FBI so that it could be used at trial, actually to placing the bomb up underneath the car. All of the components were identical, the car was identical, and the question was, would the results be identical? We didn't know.
Stand by for detonation. 3, 2, 1.
When the dust cleared, I looked at the car that had just been blown up. It was the same car that I had seen 2 years ago in the crime scene. I could not believe it. I turned to look at Mike Townley. Mike Townley's face was ashen. He turned to me and said, "I'd like to leave." I had 2 of the other agents take him back to the car.
Townley was somebody who had been involved in several murders, but never close up. He always did it at a distance. He never saw the victim. He was a soldier. He was told to assassinate somebody. He put a bomb somewhere. He did something, but he didn't do it close up. And when he saw the effects of it, he was apparently very affected by it.
2.5 years after the Letelier assassination, the Ayala brothers and an associate go on trial. The photos of the 2 blown-up cars provide the crowning piece of evidence.
The resemblance was remarkable. At the end of 7 weeks of trial, the jury, when it deliberated, asked for 2 pieces of evidence. One were the pictures of the cars. An hour later, they came back guilty on all counts.
The court sentences Enrique and Sanchez Ayala in the murder plot. But in a retrial, their convictions are overturned on a technicality. Over the next 20 years, 2 other anti-Castro nationalists and 3 Chilean officials end up serving time for the Letelier killing. FBI agent Carter Cornick sees Letelier's murder as a tragic misunderstanding.
I think he was assassinated for 2 reasons. One, for what he had done, which was stopping government Dutch loans to Chile. And 2, they perceived him as a threat, which in reality he was not. The Chilean military believed that Letelier was forming a government in exile in the United States. It was simply not valid. It's just paranoia.
Documents uncovered after the fall of Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet would later confirm that the Chilean government ordered the death of Letelier. The FBI's relentless pursuit of the killers solved a difficult case and put rogue nations on notice.
I think it sent a message to other governments considering extraterritorial sanctions, assassinations. Think twice before you do it.